Hello. On behalf of Sebastian Stier, Johannes, Breuer and myself, I welcome you to Berlin. Very broadly, media use and media content is increasingly fragmented. Media content is being fragmentedly distributed, but also consumed. People see news through social impartition. They stumble upon news intentionally or incidentally. The news are surrounded by popularity cues affecting the perception of news. News consumption and media content is very fast and fluid these days. With that said, media use studies are rather broad and slow. Typically, media use studies are based on self-reporting through surveys, which are dependent on recruitment, but also, as has been shown several times in the past, subject to strong biases. So in the realm of open science, we try to combine traditional survey with two other sources of data, all of which fulfill privacy claims, essentially, and are freely available. So that is, we first use web tracking from a commercial provider that is available to people who buy it, or teams who can buy it and afford it, which basically looks at, for a certain panelist, all the websites or URLs that have been opened, but only limited to the second level domain, for example, facebook.com or newyorktimes.com, youtube.com. So we don't know about specific articles that have been read or specific videos that have been seen, but just that YouTube has been opened at a certain point in time. Second, we built on the Eule or Facebook Forschung plugin, browser plugin, to track public posts on Facebook. That is, people or participants install a browser plugin limited to desktop computers and only Chrome or Firefox browsers for now. And when they install it, the plugin unobtrusively scans and captures all the posts that people see that are public, and collects the date and time when the post has been seen, the position in the stream, links that are included in the post, reactions, popularity cues, stuff like that. And we can track the posts with links that people see. And the third source of data that we employed is a very traditional panel survey, online panel survey, where we ask people about social demographics, for example, but also their media use. Now, the problem is how to combine these three data sources while keeping track of privacy aspects. We thereby started with the survey data. That is, we asked people or survey respondents about their web tracking or about their willingness to participate in web tracking. And if so, if they were willing to join the web tracking, we asked them about their identification code in the web tracking so we can match their data. We also provided them with additional incentives if they did. If they did, we then knew who reaches which second level domain. So we knew male, 32 years old, opens YouTube a lot, for example, but that's as far as we can get. So next, we also asked survey respondents whether they'd be willing to install our browser plugin. As I said, it's only available to desktop users on Firefox and Chrome, so it already eliminates several potential participants. But the others actually were being presented with additional incentives, again, money essentially. And if people were to agree to install the plugin, we then asked them inside the plugin for another identification code based on for example, their mother's first name's first character, or their birth date's day, for example, to kind of make up for this anonymous code, to combine the data sources between the browser plugin and the survey. So then we could see that people from the survey male 32 years old, for example, visits facebook.com from the web tracking, we can then see what the person saw on Facebook, including, for example, links to the New York Times. And we can then again see in the web tracking that they visited the New York Times like a second later. So in theory, that's great. That really enhances media use studies and provides us with a very in-depth and in the situation or in situ based capture of media use. So ideally, this would work, right? The problem is we can never be sure. I'm trying to move my video so you can see that. I'm not sure my video is now moved or not. I hope so. However, on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see that we try to do so through a dynamic time warping-like approach. Dynamic time warping is an approach from time series analysis where you try to make this dynamically sized window, essentially, of a certain timing duration that you slide over your data and try to capture as many of these episodes as possible. In our case, we looked for a facebook.com call that is followed by tracked Facebook posts from the other data set, but those posts needed to be tracked before the next facebook.com call to kind of glue these two together. And then for every such post that includes a URL, we also looked for subsequent calls to this very same URL in the web tracking. So we tried to match these episodes in certain, in windows of certain sizes. And if I can, yes. So what you can see here is the cumulative share of such identifications based on certain or various units of analysis with the size of the sliding window at the bottom. So, for example, let me just check. For example, for the number of participants that we were able to collect such episodes within a time, we saw that within a time window of, for example, 10 minutes, we can identify matches for only 15% of the panelists. Not a lot of such episodes, but a few episodes for only 15% of all the panelists. And if you increase this time duration window, this sliding window, to, for example, 60 minutes, we can identify matches for, a quarter, 25% of the panelists. But we don't know which is more accurate. So we can assume, or can we assume, that people, for example, visiting a URL almost 60 minutes after opening facebook.com and seeing the URL there in a post, are they still visiting this URL because of Facebook? Or might it be that they got an email from a colleague saying, hey, you should visit this website, and they visited the website because of the email, and only because our time window was 60 minutes, we would assume it was because of a facebook.com call. So we don't know much about this time window, and we face several problems when we try to combine our data from a theoretically very rich combinatory approach. In addition, and I'll just move my video back, I hope. Yes. In addition, we face several other limitations to our, I would say seminally very promising approach. That is, we have data from 3 different data providers, which are in different formats, so you just need the hands-on qualifications to kind of combine the data, I would say. We face 3 rather high barriers for participation. We need to convey people to actually install a browser plugin, to also participate in a web tracking panel, which makes it more expensive because we need more incentives. We have 3 potentially 3 technological weak points where data collection, for example, could lack certain levels of detail, for example. And we, of course, have 3 potential privacy pitfalls. So what does this mean for open science and its 4 principles? of prioritization, sharing data, sharing analysis materials, and sharing trained models. Well, by trying to follow these principles, we saw very high demands for us specifically for both infrastructure and potential participants, as I just mentioned. That is, we were working with very privacy sensitive data and thus needed to be very careful. Also, as certain changes in the data structures, for example, in the Facebook layout, can easily lead to either data loss, which isn't very good, but also to it could also lead the other way, where we would suddenly capture unintentionally privacy infringing data, like names of people who shared posts publicly. And also, it seems impossible to this day to get EABs to review such a design. So, do we have any suggestions for future studies alike? Yep, we do, and I'll move the video one more time. So we saw that strong incentives were essentially a driver for our participation rate. So that's something to keep in mind also if you apply for funding. We had informed consents on every level, on every stage, that we believe really helped. We put focus on storing data locally, which is something that is very important to Germans particularly. We offered technological support to the participants. Everything was as much as possible open source, and we also communicated that to the participants, which we believe also helped. At least the communication helped. It wasn't really used much, as we can see in the click count numbers. We allowed people to self-delete their data, but nobody did that. We anonymized almost everything that was possible, and still we are left with very privacy relevant data that we cannot offer as open data completely. We cannot share in its entirety. We can only share clustered or aggregated data so far. So hopefully you can learn from our mistakes to modernize media use studies even further, and while keeping also the open science principles in mind. Thank you very much.